Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbite. Joining me tonight in studio is Ben Kinsley, who's co-host and head of, what is your title at Imperium Advisors?
Well, I'm the owner. Okay.
No, that's even a better thing than president. Owner of Imperium Advisors. That's
yes,
good.
Yes, exactly.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's good. And our guest tonight is Mike Pieciak, who's the Vermont treasurer. I have the word elect here. I just scratched that out. Congratulations.
No longer elect.
Yeah.
No longer. He's got the job.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's great to be with you, Pat. Great to be with you, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
So-
glad to have you here.
Yeah. So you're loving it?
Yeah, you know, first month basically into the job, and you know, you start these jobs that have a lot of responsibilities. Right at the same time, there's a new biennium.
Right.
So the legislature, you know, they have a lot on their plate. They have a lot that they're thinking about. They want you to come in and explain your job to them while
That you don't know.
while you're trying to learn your job. Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, so that's not ideal to have both of those things happen at the same
And
time.
a budget you had nothing to do to
And a
prepare.
budget you had nothing to
Yeah.
do with. Beth was very gracious in terms of the transition and, helping, showing me what the budget was going to be,
Right.
what it was looking like, asking if I had input. So that was great and,
Yeah.
and very helpful. But yeah, you don't fully understand the budget implications until you're in the job for some time.
Right.
So, but we have a great team, and that's settled in.
That's great.
And that's the most important part.
That's
Is
great.
who you're working with.
Well, I just want to tell everybody, and thank you again for all the work you did on COVID. Every time somebody talks about COVID on the other show I do, they mention you,
Oh well.
because I think your input about all the statistics and the data, but you didn't just give us the data and the statistics, you actually made it so some of us could understand it. And that was important for COVID, because that was pretty scary for
Yeah.
some of us.
Well, I think I'm glad to hear that, because
No, it's good.
our focus was trying to make that information accessible to
Yeah.
people.
Well,
That was
especially,
key.
what did you call us? Something about, what wasn't, you didn't use the word old, but people that were, that were.
Advanced age.
Yeah, but
high
no, but
risk,
whatever
High risk.
category, I'm high risk, that's me,
Yeah.
I'm high risk. And then also, I don't know how many people know this, but you're one of the first people that flagged EB5 scandal. And
Yeah, this is a part of your background that, I mean, we'll dive into that, but
Yeah.
I think not a lot of people are potentially aware of that. Like, I think you were one of the first people to raise your hand and be like, guys, like,
Yeah,
there's a
hello.
problem here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had moved back to Vermont in February 2014 to take this job as Deputy Commissioner of Securities, and within a year we had started a investigation into EB5, and within a year of that brought the case, against the developers. So
Right.
it happened, in retrospect, I think it happened very fast.
Yeah.
In terms of putting all that information together. But yeah, happy to talk about that.
yeah, really, for sure.
Yeah,
because
we'll dive into that one.
yeah,
That's a
because
good
I know Win Smith really well, and up at Sugarbush, and he had an EB5 program, but when I was down
They
talking to him, he
managed
said
it, yeah.
his was small and he could manage it.
Yeah.
And I think his and many others in the state were successful. This thing was just bigger than a bread
Oh,
box.
for sure. Others were successful. And Wins was a good example
Yeah.
of doing best practices.
Yeah.
He came from a financial industry, but if I remember correctly, theirs was like $20 million, I think, the EB5 at Sugarbush.
Oh, I
Still
don't
not,
remember.
still not tiny, but
No.
And it was important for what they built. But he had a completely separate manager of the money, and they built in, conflict controls and
Right.
And,
Well, that would be Win.
yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
So-
that's who he was. Anyway, so I should get back to the program.
now that we've teased
you better pay attention. So tell us a little bit about your background, because it is interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I grew up in Brattleboro. My parents still live there in Brattleboro, and I say that my real interest in community service and public service, emanated from my parents. Neither of them were in politics or are in politics, but they both, in their own way, served the community of Brattleboro in a variety of capacities. My dad owns a CPA firm. He worked with a lot of small businesses.
Oh, he grew up with numbers.
Yeah, so I remember my dad telling me about a situation that a client of his was in, describing the challenges that they were having with their business or interacting with the state or the town or whatever it
Right.
was. And so it was, really was impactful growing up hearing those stories about how government, could be doing a better job, or, how we could be, getting out of the way on things
for Dad.
that didn't make any regulatory sense. But so, he was on, he was the president of the Chamber of Commerce. He helped expand the golf course in Brattleboro from 9 to 18 holes. He didn't play golf even. He brought helped bring lights to the football field.
Nice.
In the high school. So, yeah, and I remember asking him, particularly on the golf one, because like I said, he doesn't play golf. Why he spent so much time working on that project, instead of his own business or not being at home.
Right.
And he just said that because Brattleboro had given him and our family so much that he felt obligation to give back to Brattleboro, and that was something that definitely stuck with me. And my mom, when she was 6 months pregnant with me, founded a soup kitchen in Brattleboro, Bridget's Kitchen.
Whoa!
And
wow.
she still is still runs the soup. She told me she was going to retire 6 months ago, but she's in her late 70s. I won't say a particular age.
Yeah,
but
really. Thank you.
Thank you. Give us an idea.
If I'm older
Right?
than your mother, I'm leaving.
So she, so she's been running that for 39, 40 years.
Good for her.
Wow.
The need in Brattleboro. I remember going there as a kid, and they have 30 or 40 people come in for food, and now it's 100 plus, and people are taking food away to other people. So the need has not gotten any less great.
It's scary, isn't it? We've had the people from the food bank and others that have Sue Mittner at Capstone. They've got a food bank, and she says the people themselves have changed. You see people coming back from work in suits, and because they need it, they need the help. It's a whole different dynamic.
I think that
for sure.
I think that COVID exposed a whole bunch of how close people actually were to the brink, and I think that on the heels of COVID, the inflation that we've seen over the past year, particularly in food prices, has also really kind of shaken people's financial security.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those people that were living paycheck to paycheck before and just barely making it, now they're choosing between do I fill my oil tank this winter, or do I put food buy groceries for this month? What do I do?
I don't know if it was Mary Moulton, but somebody told us on this show that the first thing that goes is you cut back on food because people don't see that. They see if the lights are on in the house and if there's a foreclosure sign on the door, or they take your car. So those things you keep up, but the food, what is it? 2 out of 5, it's 40% of Vermonters deal with food insufficiency.
Yeah.
Is that the right word? I always say
food insecurity.
Insecurity, thank you, that's the right word. And that just scares me in this state of agriculture.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, you just see that in those numbers, right?
Yeah.
The growing need of people coming into St. Bridget's Kitchen.
Yeah, good for your mother. We should have them on. My
Yeah, you
mom and
should.
dad on.
Exactly.
So, the thing that's most, I think, not important, but the thing that's most interesting to highlight now that I'm in elected politics, my mom and my dad are from different political backgrounds.
Oh,
So,
that's interesting for you.
Yeah, my dad is a Republican. It makes sense with his sort of business and Chamber of Commerce background. And my mom is a Democrat, given made sense with
soup
her
kitchen and
sort of social justice background. So I joke that they used to be able to watch TV in the same room, and now that's not possible.
It's gone too far.
But you're in a business, except for one thing which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But you're in a not necessarily political job. I mean, you're in the job of protecting the state's monies and investing, and that's not necessarily political. Unless you get into, what is the word, divestiture? About things that people don't like smoking or the whatever. Then you should pull out the.
And there's a bill that just got introduced last week that does that, and it seems like there's one every year, but I'm sure that will be a conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I actually think in a lot of ways most of the statewide offices, at least in Vermont, are fairly apolitical.
Yeah, they have to be.
With the possible except sometimes, election, stuff with election and Secretary of State, so that can get a little political sometimes, and governor, lieutenant governor will obviously weigh into political debates
for
on
sure.
occasion. But I think by and large, statewide officers are really more or less, they have a job to do. They're there to do a job, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there's a team to manage. There's issues that have to be confronted every year on a routine basis. you have to make sure, the state's financial health is in good status. The auditor has audits that he's conducting, and so yeah, everyone's sort of sticking to their work and trying to do the best they can to serve Vermont.
Well, I know any of the
public.
jobs I had, I was told flat out, you work for everybody.
You work for everybody.
So don't go showing up at any particular party or anything,
Right.
just stay away. And I always did. I don't think I ever, Tom Torty accused me of being someplace one time, and I had a big argument with him because I knew I didn't. But anyway, go ahead, just lead us off. Yeah.
So prior, your last job was at DFR, the Department of Financial Regulation, and there's some cool stuff that you did there. I think we should touch on. One of which was several settlements. There was one for an insurance company in South Carolina for $1.8 million. For inadequate health insurance for college students. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You can tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so that one, I think our team was very proud of that. It was the largest settlement we've had on the insurance side in the history of our department. So, $1.8 million, I think it was $1 million, just under $1 million fine, and we really wanted to send a statement because we thought the behavior was really egregious in that situation. So, there are about 6 or 7 colleges that had insurance through the South Carolina company. Mm-hmm. The company was required under Vermont law when they provided a student health plan to carry all of the mandates that Vermont law has. Right. And they didn't do that, and they didn't do it for a number of years. And it wasn't just sort of academic. Like when you went and looked at the claims, we found about 212 individuals that should have had coverage that didn't. Now, some of them paid out of pocket, $500, $600, $700, but some of them were paying tens of thousands up to over $100,000 out of pocket for something that should have been covered under Vermont law. So the other part of that $1.8 million, a significant part was restitution to those 212 individuals. So the company did make right, but we also wanted to include a significant penalty because they had noticed that they needed to have this coverage. They didn't provide it for a number of years, and it had a real impact on individuals. I remember there were like 4 or 5 top payments, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars that had to go out. And I remember calling, and they were like, so the top 4, I think I asked our team, can you give me their numbers? I want to call to make sure they understand what's coming to them.
Right. They got a check that shows up, and they're like,
So I called this one student out west and said, I'm calling from the Department of Financial Regulation. There's a check for $45,000. And we're mailing it out next Monday, and we wanted to make sure we had your address right because this was a population that moved around quite a bit.
Right.
Young
Pretty
students.
mobile population. Yeah.
And I thought the individual would be a little more excited about it. Maybe he was a suspect or something. And
it's like, this is some sort of scam.
So I think he hung up, called his parents who said, we paid that $45,000. He better get that check. Yeah. And then he called back quite enthusiastic about making sure making sure we had the right
Well, we get those weird calls sometimes. You never know whether they're for real or not.
And honestly, he did the right thing. We always tell people, be suspicious of those kind of
just give me your Social Security and we'll get the check right in there.
You want me to give you my address?
Exactly. So, Mike, on this list of accomplishments, this one I personally like. You expanded the supervision of online security trading and cryptocurrency platform.
Yeah.
We were before you came to the show tonight. We were all talking about cryptocurrency because what's his name? Ethan Frost, who is at UVM. He's their head cryptologist. Is that a word?
He's the head of the crypto club.
Crypto club, nice.
And he's going to come on the radio show with me. And I said, you're going to have to write the questions because this is out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So, what did you do? Because I bet people were pleased.
Yeah. So on this crypto settlement, it was pretty significant. It was really had national impact.
Oh, really?
One of the settlements, the one that we had most recently, and right before I left the department, was with a company called Binance, and it was a $100 million settlement.
Oh.
But it was a settlement with all of the other states and with the SEC as well. And why I think that was a big accomplishment is because the matter started in our department. There was an application from Binance to have a banking license, and our banking team looked at this and said, geez, it looks like they're doing something on the security side that really looks like an investment, and we should have that side of the house look at this. And they did and said, really, they should be offering this in a different way, and there should be disclosures, and there should be financial statements, and there should be all these things that you would offer somebody in an investment. So we sort of expanded it out to another group of states, and then sort of all of the states, and then all of the states extended it to the SEC, and everybody together sort of came together in this cumulative settlement. So we played our team played a major role, not in just discovering this issue, but then bringing all the states and the SEC together to announce a settlement basically on the same day, which I've never, it's pretty unprecedented.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy
to get all those cats, lined up and announced. But ultimately, what we wanted to make sure is happening in the crypto market is that those companies are not sort of going outside of the consumer protection and really the community and economic protections that have been built in over the last 100 years. So, I mean, there's a reason the FDIC was created. There was a run on the banks during the Great Depression, and that sort of created a considerable negative downward spiral in terms of the economy and the banking system. There are reasons that in this cryptocurrency company, they were offering sort of deposit accounts for their cryptocurrency, but we're not FDIC protected.
There's no FDIC protection, and so there's some debate about is this really a currency? Is it a
Well, there's certainly that debate too. In my opinion, it's really it's like a commodity. I mean, and even at least with some commodities, there's an underlying value. Like if I was going to sell you corn or a corn future, I guess if it's the future, the underlying value is not. It's just sort of what you'll pay me at some point into the future. But with crypto, there's no underlying asset. There's no underlying value. It's whatever someone's willing to pay you at a given point.
Right.
So it really is speculatory in that way, and not.
And nobody backs it up.
No, I mean
it's not like the FDIC was at $100,000 or something.
It's not a currency necessarily.
Yeah, you can't hold it in your hand. Right?
Well, yeah. How many U.S. dollars can you hold in your hand?
But it's not there.
But it's to Mike's point, there's no asset behind it.
Right.
In most cases, some of them are indexed, the stable coins, quote unquote, are indexed to something usually, but again, it's not an asset.
Right.
So how do you treat that? And that's I think one of the bigger conversations, just globally right now. So what do you do with those?
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a not insignificant environmental impact as well.
Right.
So like Bitcoin, which is the most popular type of cryptocurrency, there's this proof of stake and this proof of work concept, and I have to remember which one's which, but I think it's proof of work. That you sort of say, okay, well, everybody compete on these algorithms to be able to record this transaction on the blockchain, and maybe 10,000 people attempt to get that ability to do it, but only one person's successful. So, that one person had to put a tremendous amount of computing power to solve the algorithm, but so did the other 9,999. So there's a lot of wasted energy consumption. The process is kind of clunky. We did this analysis that showed one Bitcoin transaction was the equivalent, took in the amount of energy consumption that the equivalent Vermont household would over a 7 or 8 week period. So it just gives you a sense of how much consumption.
Crazy. Yeah, it is pretty crazy. And it's certainly a problem in that industry that needs to be solved. I think the second major crypto, not that we're getting off topic now, but
because we should go to page 2.
But there are some not necessarily Bitcoin, but other popular coins out there that are trying.
They're trying to solve for that. They need to solve for that because it really, and then you can see examples where, they're literally crypto mines are putting back online full time, like coal burning plants in parts of the country.
Yeah, it's this is not what we're trying to do here.
Yeah,
so not productive.
There's some work to do in the crypto space.
I feel like a deer in headlight listening to the two of you. You're going to have to learn quick, I think. That's good. Why don't we skip to page 2, seriously, because I want to talk about him being treasurer.
Yeah, I think we talked about COVID and the work you did there, and I think that was. I think that the weekly. I know you participated in many of the weekly press briefings, but I think that was a really great way for Vermonters to hear from state leadership and understand what's going on, what are the metrics, And Vermont's response was rated very highly in terms of popular opinion. I think that's a large part why is that really regular communication and updates and like here's how we're doing.
And this was a learn as you go deal.
And this was obviously
no book anywhere.
None of us have lived through this
Right.
before.
No, exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think it was important. I think it was critical, really, actually, when you think about the sort of the two-way street of trust. Like we needed the public to trust us, and we needed to trust the public too, right?
Right. There's do the right thing.
And you only build that trust if you're sort of being transparent, and that means having press conferences every week or multiple times a week, and having them last hours, and having the media ask questions. It also means saying we don't know the answer to that, or sort of, or we were wrong on this, and this is the updated analysis. So I think it was, but it was at the same time making sure that we were providing the best information we could at that moment, so that and presenting it in a way that people could understand.
Yeah, and not dumbing down, which
Yeah.
was very important. You just presented it so I got it, but I didn't feel like we were being now children.
Yeah.
Which when it's that monumental, you could very easily slip into that, but it was done perfectly, and I look forward to the reports.
And there was an absence of federal leadership at the time. People turned to the states.
That's true.
So we were all the more. You remember the New York State press conferences with Governor Cuomo early on in the pandemic. I think probably, I'm sure, I know I did. I'm sure Dr. Levine and the governor tuned into those as well. And then we're doing our own press conferences. But
Well, my mother's group, they loved Dr. Levine.
oh yes, yeah.
Yes. They just were in love with this guy. Whatever he said was golden. That was it.
So it was sort of after COVID. It was after we had been in COVID for a while, and we got this outreach from a farm in Rutland, the Hathaway farm, and they said every year they do a corn maze, and this corn maze, I think it was probably 2021. They wanted to call it Vermont Heroes or something, and they wanted.
But it put you and
They wanted a full-length photo of the governor, Dr. Levine, and myself.
Oh, how cool in a corn maze!
So you go through the corn maze, and there'd be questions about us that would help determine whether you should go straight, left, right, or whatever. But they had, so when you showed up to it, they had these 3 life-size cutouts of the governor.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But the thing that's funny when you say about Dr. Levine, we were saying, what are you going to do with these afterward? And they said, well, there's already been quite a few women that want to take the Dr. Levine one with them.
I'd take yours home. Yeah, no, I know all my mother's buddies, so she's since passed away, but just love Dr. Levine. He was a hit with the.
That's funny.
With the older population.
I guess
What is it? High risk.
High risk population.
That's me. I found out I'm a, downsizer. That's a new way of saying older than dirt. Downsizer. I had a show the other day and they kept saying, and I'm like, seriously, I'm a downsizer? I don't think so. But anyway, so you were sworn in January 5th.
Yeah.
I watched that. It was really cool. Anything surprised you when you finally got there? There's always something that you can share with us that you think you have an idea, even if you've been there before with Beth, and then it's your job. And what are we doing, people?
Well, I think the most sort of viscerally surprising thing was showing up, and I guess they were going to replace the carpets in my office, and they hadn't gotten to that, but they had pushed all the furniture up against the wall.
Great.
And it's actually still like that now, 1 month in. So,
So your office is still like in a closet. It's okay.
I've been working out of a conference room, but it's all good. But I think there was a determination made when BGS came and looked at the carpet that, well, actually, maybe this furniture should all just go as well, and we should,
Really?
So so we're working on the office. So that was
that's great.
that was a fun sort of
Walk in,
surprise to work
welcome.
through.
But I have my plants. Where did my plants go?
My desk plants need to go somewhere.
Sorry about that. That's
No, but it's been great. I mean, the team at the office is awesome, and a few people came over with me from DFR.
Oh, nice.
So folks I've been working with for years.
Yep.
And we went through COVID together, and all these different things we did DFR together. So it's been great.
Oh, that's good that you were able to bring some folks.
Yeah.
And the people at the Treasurers, I think a lot of them have been there a while.
They have.
That's a place you need the historical memory.
And it reminds me of DFR in terms of the culture and the employees that, they stay for a long time because there's a good culture, and they want to do their job well, and they want to serve Vermonters, and they'll go the extra mile.
That's great.
And that's really the experience I've had, which, I'm sure those are the two places I've worked in state government. I'm sure that's replicated in all the
there
agencies.
is a pretty tight group. They're all in their own little niches, but no, at DMV, you had to make sure if you worked at night to make sure they knew downstairs that you were there, because they bring in casseroles. And I just would make sure I call down there to ask you a question. They caught on after a while, but
Well, both of those departments also strike me as like they're highly professional, highly skilled people. And I can see that. The culture piece is probably something that does appeal to that group.
it's good.
Good work-life balance.
Good work-life balance.
Interesting work, and well compensated, relative to some other opportunities that are particularly in the central Vermont area.
Yep.
Yeah, like for that type of work, you have insurance companies, and not a ton for financial services in Vermont unless you're working remotely, which is more viable these days. But I can imagine that it's probably more rewarding than some of those other.
Yeah, and you get that part of it. You get that benefit of being a public servant and having the impact be felt of your work.
And you certainly impact all of us.
Especially the retirees.
Especially the retirees. I'm looking at the word pension. During your campaign, which people need, you left DFR and worked on your campaign, which is a great that you were able to do that, because you're talking the state of Vermont. That's a lot. I just tried the Senate one time and that exhausted me. But the whole state of Vermont.
Yeah, I will surely be relying on my own pension now after having spent 7 or 8 months unemployed.
Exactly.
In the middle of my professional life. But no, but it was a great experience. I had to leave DFR. There were too many opportunities for conflict. I believe.
The Hatch Act, right? That was one of the. Isn't the Hatch Act?
Well,
I
think that's more sort of federal. But anyway, you could. The Hatch Act, I think, is sort of talking about like your 9 to 5 and your official capacity and what you do outside your official capacity. But there comes a point where I can't be regulating an insurance company by day and
asking them for money.
Yeah, by night.
Money at night. Good point. Good point. Well, see, that's that ethics thing.
Yeah,
we
the
talk
ethics
about.
thing there. Yeah,
exactly.
Comes into play.
So you ran on pension, sustainability, housing, workforce, and financial literacy. And I know Beth was very interested in that, the financial literacy. We could talk about each one of these, but are you pursuing the financial literacy part?
Oh yeah, for sure. We're excited about that. At DFR, we had financial literacy as well.
Oh.
And some of those settlements that we'd have it go into a consumer education fund, and then we would find partners to do financial literacy programs with. And that's the model I think we want to continue at the Treasurer's Office, is try to find things that really are impactful for people and change their lives and are hands-on, not just coming to a seminar and listening for an hour or a couple hours. Not that that's not good, but we want it to be more involved and impactful. So, for example, at DFR, we had a grant with a credit union that allowed them to hire an additional person that worked with small businesses that were really just sole proprietorships, so that they could get their financial house in order, understand the benefits of having insurance. If they had debt and high interest debt, they could consolidate it at the credit union. But it was a person that worked, all day with these small businesses, and then also was able to provide them low-cost financial services through the Opportunities Credit Union. So that's an example, I think, of something that is really highly impactful. That's financial literacy. That's that's not just setting up a financial seminar. So we're trying to continue to find opportunities to have those kind of partnerships. I'm interested in if we can partner with the Department of Corrections for individuals that are going to be leaving prison within the next year to 6 months. Because having access to financial services is an issue. So not just having the knowledge, but not having the access to financial services. There's a whole host of we're still working on them, but there's a whole host of initiatives that we'd like to do. Yeah.
Good for you. There's a program that they ask you to participate in, and it's a mock setup, and you just leaving corrections, and you have to find housing, a job, money.
Right.
I mean, this whole
Pretty
car.
overwhelming, honestly. It's like rebuilding your whole life.
Yeah,
like,
and I failed the exercise totally because it's overwhelming when you don't have, you're starting from nothing. I mean, you don't have any history. It depends on how long you've been in. It was very difficult.
you don't have a revenue stream, like, you know, like
Yeah,
that's a big
exactly.
piece of it.
It was very
so-
enlightening and a little unnerving, actually. Not many passed, actually, just for the record.
Yeah.
But it's good that
well, this is why recidivism is such a problem. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
we don't exactly set people up to succeed. We just kind of dump them back out in the
Well,
world.
exactly.
Yeah. And the amount, as you know, I mean, the amount that we pay for corrections, you know, it's just really
Oh, the people that work there?
astronomical.
Yeah, I think
Just
in-
just the whole mechanics of
Right.
of incarcerating people.
Well,
is
oh,
very
yes, right.
expensive.
Yeah, I think.
Right.
I
Should
mean,
get
there's
our
obviously there's different levels, and the cost like escalates depending on
Yeah.
on what level of security you're in. But I think the average in Vermont, at least a couple of years ago, in the last report I saw, was something like $60-something thousand a year.
Yeah.
To house somebody.
to per person
Yep.
that's incarcerated.
Wow.
And, you know, that's obviously the state's paying that, and so if you have, you know, that's where recidivism really becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Is like if you're not successfully launching people back out into the world
Yeah.
after they've completed their sentence, then you're just
Yeah.
putting them back in, and you know it's not a great situation for anybody,
No.
taxpayers or the people
And the
involved.
people that work in the prisons, I mean, they're just, you hear really horrible stories about how understaffed they are.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
and it's a tough job, and it's hard to get people to come and to stay. So, you know, another reason to work on trying to, you know, get the recidivism rates to a better place is to make sure the staffing is better in the prisons, that there are less,
Yeah.
you know, less individuals to have to incarcerate. So, yeah, I mean, it's not, you know, so whatever piece we can play in that, you know.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good for you. And I don't know if maybe we could work. Ben and I've been working a lot on housing.
Yeah.
And what can you do from the treasurer's perspective I can think of a bunch of things, making things more affordable, but how can we find affordable housing? That's the word.
So the one, you know, the big initiative that we'll continue to build on is something called the Local Investment Advisory Committee, or others call it, you know, 10% for Vermont.
Oh,
so this was a
great.
program that allowed the treasurer to invest up to 10% of the state's cash on hand in the Vermont economy for job creation and economic development.
Nice.
And you know, there was that 10% number. You know, originally was pegged at 39 million, and you know, tens of millions of dollars went out the door. But we right now have $19 million to invest. But we're also doing an analysis of that 10% number, because we think it's actually going to be quite higher at this point. We have a lot more cash on hand. We've had surpluses. We're in really good financial position.
Excellent.
So I think there'll be tens and tens of millions of dollars to invest. And the committee, you know, has housing as sort of one of its top priorities. So
good.
for new investment, and housing and climate infrastructure, which could impact both climate and
Right.
housing, because infrastructure is critical.
Yeah.
So we're going to have that set up in the next couple of months to be ready to deploy.
Is this a legislative committee or a committee of people that know about housing?
So the treasurer ultimately is the decision maker by statute, but the committee has a representative from VITA, from the bond bank,
Good.
from the Housing Finance Authority,
Right.
so that's critical, from Efficiency Vermont, and then from VPIC.
Excellent.
So all of the sort of
Pretty good
finance agencies.
representation.
Yeah, good, yeah.
And we want to, you know, once we're ready to go, we want to be more public about this so we can get good
Excellent.
projects. But I actually, you know, when you think about what are the things that we should be doing on housing right now, I mean, more money is certainly good, but there's a lot of money that's been put out into
Yeah.
the market, and not all of it
Not
has
so
been spent.
thoughtful, right.
And there's a limited number of contractors, and there's a limitation on supply chain. And if there's a component that is borrowing with any of these projects, interest rates are high right now. So there are other things the legislature, I think, should be thinking about, and they are. It appears to me, you know, you're seeing some movement this session around reforming some of the regulatory environment on housing. So that could be at the local level with zoning. It could also be Act 250 with housing development. I think I live in Winooski now, and I think Winooski is a great example of of a town that updated its zoning.
For sure.
And really provides the most efficient experience for developers. And you're seeing dense downtown development going up in Winooski and more individuals moving there.
Yep.
Now, that's not the same kind of development you'd see across the entire state, but you want to see it in the densely populated areas.
Yep.
But Winooski's a great example of what you can do.
Yeah. And it's less of a burden on our environment. You have people driving less. There's less of a carbon footprint. It's easier to maintain infrastructure and even services when you're more densely compact. So I think I think that is a really good example of what we could do with the right regulatory structure.
I look at two different ends of that spectrum, but both examples in Chittenden County of with Winooski on the housing front and really building a downtown core. Really over the last 2 decades in downtown Winooski, and using local zoning to do it in large part. And then the other town being Williston and what they've done over the last 30 years.
Right.
In bringing, first it was retail.
Yeah.
They started with retail, and now they're bringing dense housing,
which is great,
right next to that retail. And I think it's something like 800 units of housing they've added in the last 5 years. That's right in the downtown center, and they have space to build a lot more, and they're continuing to build more.
And South Burlington's making strides on the same thing, and I think Milton is poised to sort of continue to be this sort of suburb of choice for a lot of people.
Suburb of choice, a little cheaper than some of the other towns. And
then St. Albans is really a success story also in terms of their development, and they're building more downtown as well. They're continuing to try to add to their downtown. So, I think the future is pretty bright for certain parts of the state up here, but we have to make sure that replicates itself in other parts of the state. There obviously will be a benefit statewide by having more economic development activity anywhere in the state. But I think there is a need to make sure, particularly in the southern part of the state and Northeast Kingdom, that those economic impacts are felt too.
And so I told Ben, Peter Tucker, who's the head of the Vermont Real Estate, he submitted a report, commercial to residential, that the realtors got together and submitted this report that said use the commercial buildings that aren't being used to their fullest, or we're selling some buildings, the state is selling some buildings. Why not think about using them for pretty unique apartments or condos or whatever you want? They're all built fairly well,
right?
So they're solid and
one of the challenges with that is the plumbing. Because there's no showers, for example. The appropriate number of bathrooms per living unit. So it does require depending on what the structure was. It does require pretty significant changes to the building.
I think the shower part is important.
minor.
Sort of like camping, same thing.
Yeah, but it's also things
Where's
like
the shower?
It's also things like kitchens. You don't necessarily have so there's a lot of plumbing that needs to happen, and wiring, and then the safety codes for commercial is much different than residential.
Oh, is it? Oh,
in terms of like number of sprinklers per feet. So there are a lot of
it's not so
changes.
easy as it sounds.
Not so easy as slapping a new sign on the building and changing the locks. But it's something to look at, right? Especially in downtown cores. Probably in some of the older buildings that might need to be rehabbed anyway.
Because COVID certainly has changed the way that commercial real estate sort of operates. Businesses need a lot less space.
For sure.
People want to work
people are actually quitting because they don't want to go back to work.
Exactly.
I don't know about here in Vermont, but I was listening to the news and they want to stay home.
So we should definitely talk about pensions, since that's a major thing your office is going to be taking on. I'm sure as you continue to settle in, you're only a month into the job, so there's a lot to get your hands on. But I know you're up to speed on this issue. So bill last year to reduce the unfunded liability for our state pension funds, that's both our teachers and our state employees, by $2 billion. The vast majority of that was on teachers' health care by pre-funding it. And then also adding that into the education fund expenditure every year so that it continues to be funded ahead of time. There are still The original number on that was up to potentially as high as a $4.5 billion deficit. We addressed $2 billion of it. Do you think there's more work to do on that issue, or is this one that we're gonna, ride for a few years and kind of see how it goes?
So, I don't want to discount the certainly the deal that was struck last year. Teachers and state employee, healthcare, the OPEB, the after or post employment, other post employment benefits.
Acronyms that we're all learning.
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
And that was significant because even if you sort of solve for the pension side, there was this growing unfunded liability on the healthcare side. So I think it was important to address that, and the state of Vermont did that. It was recognized by S&P Global as a positive move. They upgraded Vermont not from AA to AAA, but they upgraded their outlook for Vermont from negative to stable.
Good, because that was big too. Two houses reduced us by it was plus and now minus.
Yeah,
that
so
was bad.
We're still, our credit rating is what we're talking about. Still credit rating is the highest in New England, but we're not AAA any longer, and we'd like to find our way back there. But on the pension, so that's good that there was progress made. I think there's, from a political standpoint, there's a lot of, not a lot of appetite to readdress the issue. It's a really challenging issue.
It's very challenging.
People were promised things. People are basing their careers on those promises.
Yep.
Even if you're 10 years into a career, it's pretty significant that you put 10 years in based on the promises that were made in terms of what would be available to you at year 30 or whatever year you're eligible for retirement. But it's also extraordinarily expensive, and not addressing this over decades means that we're paying tens of millions of dollars to pay down that unfunded liability that could be going toward child care or paid family leave or other priorities.
It's tying up resources for other things that we could be spending it on.
So it is significant, and so it's tough on both sides. Now it's an important benefit. I'm a proponent of the pension system and the defined benefit system. But to your question of what is the next thing, we're going to be doing an experience study in a couple of years, looking at all the underlying assumptions that have been made and trying to true up, how close to those assumptions did we come. And sometimes in the past, our projections, our assumptions have been maybe a little too optimistic. And when you're too optimistic, it means that you're really covering up a bigger problem, right? That, your rate of return, if it's too high, then, you're sort of covering up how much underfunding you have, because the higher your rate of, the more you expect to earn on your money, the less you need now because you're going to be earning it over time.
Correct.
But if you're not hitting that target, then in reality the problem is bigger the whole time, and you're underfunding it year over year. So I think we have to we're going to have a conversation around that. But there are other things, like for example, I don't think we need to get to 100% funded in our pension systems. If we're at 8, you can pick a number. I'd be very comfortable at 80%, because it's much higher than where the systems are now. The teacher system is hovering around 50% funded.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The state employees is in the 60s or so. So we're always going to have a pension system. We're always going to be a state. We're always going to be a going concern. It's not in the same way that you have to pay down a mortgage because you're planning to retire in the house and not have an income.
Right.
Yeah, that asset is always going to be there, and the payout is always going to be there. It's like, I think you're right. I think getting it to a higher number, even if it's not 100%.
So our goal right now is 100%. Like when we're paying the annual amounts that we're paying, the goal is to get to 100%. So if the goal is to get to 80%, then those on the budgetary side, the pressure gets a little bit less, because you're not paying as much in to get to the 80%. And also when you get to 100%, sometimes you add on extra benefits that you don't appreciate are much more expensive than at face value. Sometimes you make riskier investment choices because you're sitting pretty. And there are examples of that across the country of pension systems. So I think that 80 to 90% range is a sort of a more realistic and sort of a better place to be. And then as we're getting closer to 2038, which is when the pensions are set to be paid off, there may need to be re-amortization of some of that outstanding unfunded liability. So I think there's a combination there of getting our assumptions moderately conservative. You don't want them superly conservative because you don't want to be paying too much in that could be paying other priorities. But you want to have them, I think, be mildly conservative so that if you're missing them on the favorable side.
Right.
But I think with that discussion, you might want to think about having the goal not be 100%, but 80%, and then maybe re-amortizing out a number of years too. And so, that's a conversation to be had.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that.
So
not
you're thinking that
advocating-
this year is gonna, if we figured that too, this year is just gonna be
Yeah.
status quo to see what their assumptions, what happens.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we have a number of implementation items in the Treasurer's Office that we've been working on. There's
Yeah.
a new Group G that applies to
That's
correctional
right,
officers
corrections,
and,
right.
and mental health frontline
The
workers.
VPIC group is amazing, Tom Galanka.
Yeah.
They're a great guy, a great group, they really are.
Well, I think to your point, the assumptions are partially what got us into this mess. Like, looking back historically, like unrealistic
little
assumptions. I think that came into a little sharper focus last year because we had negative return on our pension investments last year. Obviously, that's a situation you inherited. That wasn't anything that you did.
Well, and it's just the environment.
And it's
right.
the environment. It's hard to make money in the stock market.
And we weren't as down as much as some other pension systems,
Right.
which was a good
This
sign
is
that
all
they preserved it.
COVID and everything else, right? It just all.
Well, like COVID is the roller coaster.
Yeah,
It went
it just
up
went
a lot, and then it went
Yeah.
down a lot.
Yeah, I mean, 2021 was, we were up 24, 25%.
How much
Yeah.
did GASB play into this when they asked us to
Yeah.
change the way we look at liability? Because we never, better than I, we never really reported the liability part until GASB came in
On
and
the health insurance
on the
side,
health
yeah.
insurance and said you have to report that, and we all kind of went yikes.
Yes, I mean, on the one hand, nothing actually changed, like it was always there.
Well, sure, but we had to address it.
But when
Yeah.
you are forced to put it into your
Right, it's like duh.
financial statements,
Right.
and then you see there's a negative value,
Right.
it does put it into a different context in terms of addressing the challenge.
Yeah.
So I think it highlighted the problem and surfaced it and was in this more transparent way
Which
of
is
dealing
probably
with it.
good, actually.
But it didn't create the liability. It was
No,
there.
I appreciate
Yeah.
it, just kind of flagged it.
Yeah.
And we all decided we better do something about it. And now they're talking about Medicare Advantage. Don't
Yeah.
answer that. I'm not happy. And I know there's no contract with retirees, but you sort of mentioned that you, as a retiree, you rely on what is there
Yeah.
when you retire, so.
And health insurance is important. I mean, that's becoming more and more important for people. You hear
Yes.
folks that say, pension's great, but I really.
Oh, we have the best, I swear, I light candles every day to that healthcare plan. Especially, well, people know this, my husband was in the hospital for 9 weeks this summer. Hello, thank you very much, state of Vermont. You hear people getting wiped out, paying the bills, so anyway, I'm on that, just
Yeah.
to let you know.
Yeah, good.
We're watching it. But anyway, so we have just about 7 minutes, Mike. There's so much to talk about. And I would like to go back to the divestment thing,
Yeah.
because you and I talked about this at one point. Beth was asked to divest fossil fuel companies for political reasons, and people really believe that that's the wrong thing to do. And she at the time said, my job is to make money for the pension plan, and that makes money for us. I don't know where you are on something to think about when it's presented.
Just to surface that point, I mean, in 2022, the S&P, which is sort of the 500 largest
Right.
companies, it was down, I don't know, let's call it 25% overall. But the petroleum companies were up like 70%, and
Right.
we saw gas prices go up, and there's other questions about that we'll
Right.
put to the side. But I guess just the point is, like, then a year where everything was down, there's some investments that were up. So it's something that historically has been an important consideration, I think, for pension funds. And I don't believe for political reasons, that you want to be making sort of investment decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
But on fossil fuels is a unique situation where when you're talking about it from a financial risk standpoint, like they're going forward,
there is going to be a point where it doesn't make financial sense anymore.
Right.
next
Well,
30
that's
years-
okay if you can prove that it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next 30 years of returns is not going to be like the last 30 years
Okay.
of returns. And you got to account for that.
Yeah.
And
Because pension plans, if many divest whatever, they can have a serious impact because there's a lot of money and a lot of people, and if we all move stocks from one place to the other, you could wake somebody up.
yeah, and there is, and when you look at all the other foundations and endowments and
Right.
a few pension plans and corporations that are moving in that direction, 2035, 2040, even the decision by auto manufacturers to stop producing combustible engine in 2035, or California saying they can't be for sale at a certain period.
Yeah.
I mean, all these decisions are going to add up in transitioning us to a lower carbon economy.
Right.
So you don't want to be caught on the back end of that and have stranded
true.
assets. So you got to manage it. And I think, VPIC, the numbers I understand, just for overview, is that they, just about 5 years ago, fossil fuel investments were like 7% of the pension, and now it's more like 3% of the pension. So they have a decarbonization policy, they have an ESG policy, and they've been, moving in the direction you would want them to move,
Right.
which is less exposure to these riskier assets and assets that are becoming riskier over time.
Yeah.
And just so you know, VPIC is Vermont Pension Investment Committee, and it's chaired by Tom Galanka here in Montpelier. And
And they
it's
make decisions.
big decisions.
Yeah, about like what types of things to invest in.
Right.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And we just were talking about the unfunded liability. So you do want to, you want to make sure you're getting a good return. But in the future, getting a good return will be managing that risk of these holdings, I think. And you want to have a plan to address that over time.
So the short answer is the pension funds will eventually be decarbonized, but that's going to be a financial decision, not a
I think it's a
political.
fiduciary decision,
Yeah.
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 Well, and I think if you can explain it, I think people will get it, will understand it.
Well,
We just want to be sure it's based on a sound reasoning.
Well, it's hard to say too that like we're going to divest all fossil fuel out of the pension fund this year after they got 25% returns last year.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's there'll be a point where that makes sense, right? And and it may not be today.
Well, we've
but it might be
divested things
tomorrow.
over the years. I'm trying to remember whether tobacco was, I can't remember what some of the ones years ago, but they explained it and we all got it. And
Well, tobacco is again probably partially a financial decision because
Right.
with all these big class action
yeah,
lawsuits,
right.
it's a risky
that we
investment.
benefited from
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
in Vermont. We had a lot of serious tobacco
Yeah.
money here. Anyway.
And still do. I mean, there's still a good
Yeah.
stream
Is it
of
still
money.
coming through?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh,
No, it's in
good for-
perpetuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, bad, but nice.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you really quickly, your victory tour.
Yeah.
You went to, and you kind of run, well, I shouldn't say unopposed because you had a opponent, but sort of it was yours to, you went to every town, didn't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, all 252 towns now.
50, that's right. So they're going to have to
52
change the
towns,
251 club.
Yeah.
Because we
had
had
a town
Essex.
split.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we went to Essex, the city of Essex, I should
Yeah.
say, on July 1st.
That's
the day.
really awesome. What did you learn? You must have learned.
I was going to ask that. Like, what did you
Yeah,
learn that
what'd you learn?
surprised you about the?
Well,
Vermonters.
the thing that wasn't surprising, but was the most striking, was just how beautiful the state is in every part. And it doesn't look the same in every part.
Right.
It looks different, but it is strikingly beautiful across the entire state. Parts of the more rural areas in Essex County, they were just really unbelievely, naturally
Nice.
beautiful. Also the further you got out, more rural things got. Definitely you felt a great sense of community. Those are places where people would invite you into their homes and offer you food and be quite hospitable. And not that we didn't encounter that sort of hospitality, that
That was part of the deal, though, to come in and have coffee. And,
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was just great to experience that more rural parts of the state. I mean, growing up in Vermont, I'd spent a lot of time in certain parts of our state, but I hadn't seen the entire state before.
They always say that every county or every area is different in culture.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Did you
For sure.
experience that?
I mean, just for Essex County, for example, they didn't have the same issues that you heard about in other parts of the state. They weren't talking about housing in the same way. They had, issues more relevant to rural community, agricultural issues.
Agriculture, right.
Same thing in Whitingham down in southern Vermont. They were asking about a dairy farm and support for farms.
Nice.
Just different issues. And the Rutland County area, Bennington County.
Well, Rutland's Rutland.
They all have different. They
I
do
love
have their
Rutland.
own little. They all look a little bit different. They're all beautiful, but they all look a little bit different. People have a little bit different sense of community, and they're proud of their community.
Yeah,
and I
right.
think that's part of maybe why you have those differentiations. But I saw a lot of. This wasn't surprising, but I saw a lot of opportunity. I would say in towns like cities like Rutland and Bennington and. Certainly up in Franklin County, that they have the people in place to do some,
Nice.
I think critical work over the next decade to help revitalize their communities.
Yeah. That's the buzzword these days.
Yeah.
Revitalize. Micah, we have to sort of bring this to an end. I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thanks for that.
It's so much fun to talk to you. Isn't he great? I love it.
It's awesome. We'll have to have you back because we still got plenty of
I
stuff
know,
to talk
we've
about.
got 3 more pages, some questions. And thank you for joining us, Ben. It was good to work with you tonight.
Of course.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Pat McDonald and Ben Kinsley, your host for Vote for Vermont, where we're listening beyond the sound bites.